Big Bear Homestead, and today in our Predator Control in the Homestead series we're going to talk about the pickle worm. Alright, so today we're going to talk about the pickle worm. Now, we're going to talk about the pickle worm because it was suggested or asked about through a friend of the channel who watches this series. So today we're going to talk all about the pickle worm. We're going to talk about what stages they go through, what all damages they do, the whole 9 yards, just like we always do with Predator Control in the Homestead. So let's get it started with what is a pickle worm. Okay, so let's dive into the pickle worm. And the first thing we need to know is how do we go about identifying if we've got the pickle worm on our plants. So let's begin the identification process with the eggs. Okay, now the pupa eggs, they're yellow in color and they're about 5 millimeters length, big, however you want to call it. They're sphere shaped, kind of like a globe, and they are laid in clusters of about 5 to 7. Now, you'll find these clusters of eggs underneath a leaf, on the backside of a leaf, on the plant foliage, and on the fruit of the plant. Unlike some of the other predators of the garden that we talked about that will also lay the eggs on the stem, these guys will lay it either on the backside of the foliage or on the fruit. So those are places to be looking for the eggs. Now, when it comes to the larva, okay, the larvae are usually about 1.5 millimeters to 15 millimeters in length. They are nearly all white with black and gray spots all over them. That's how you know it's the pickle larva. Now, when they enter the pupa stage right before the adult. Now, a pupa stage is basically when they're in the cocoon. Okay. Now, these guys, they're in their cocoon. It's a very thin-walled cocoon, and it's usually in a wilted up leaf. But to be honest with you, those are very rarely seen. They do a very good job of hiding them, and people usually don't stumble across them or find them. If you do, take a picture of it because you found something rare. Okay? Now, once they leave the pupa stage and they enter their adult stage, they're now a moth. Okay? And they are very distinct. Okay? They're about 2 centimeters long. The wings, they're kind of transparent. They're semi-transparent. They have a yellowish color and their wings are bordered in brown. Okay? They have about a 3 centimeter wingspan on them. Okay? And they have a dark cluster of hairs on the tip of their abdomen. Now, you very rarely see the adult moth because he's usually out at night. Okay, so unless you're out in the garden with a flashlight looking around, it's very rarely seen. Okay, so now that we know how to identify a pickle worm in all 3 stages, well, 4 stages really. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's talk about its life cycle. Alright, so we know how to identify the pickle worm. So let's talk a little bit about its life cycle because it is kind of unique and interesting. Alright, so let's first start off with the egg. Okay, the egg has a very short incubation period, 4 days. Lays the egg, 4 days later, bam, it's in the larva stage. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting. Okay? Just like the squash bug, remember when the squash bug we were talking about instars, is it just kind of grew into being a squash bug from the nymph? Well, the larva here goes through a 5-stage instar development also. But then it goes into a full, complete metamorphosis where it goes into the cocoon and then becomes the wonderful moth. Okay, but it's unique because it's one of the very few worms that will have the instar process where it's still growing and it's growing longer hairs and longer legs and everything like that. Now, while they're in the larva stage, that's where they do a lot of the damage, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But they just eat the mess out of your cucumbers and gourds and stuff along that line. Now, once it becomes a moth, okay, it becomes a little fragile when it comes to weather. Okay, if it gets really cold, it's done. Okay, they can survive mild winters. So, like here, the last couple of years, their population is now exploded. But places in like southern Florida, Texas, they're all over the place. Now, wax moths have been from the southern tip of Florida, not wax moths, I'm sorry, but pickle worms and their moths and everything have been from the southern tip of Florida all the way up into Michigan. Okay, so the north is not excluded from this. They just have a very smaller population. Because the ones that do overwinter and they make it and they found their nice little cubby hole that keeps them warm and they're able to survive over winter. As soon as springtime comes around, boy, bam, they're getting it on, okay? And they are mating and they're laying eggs by the hundreds of thousands. They're cluster here, cluster there, cluster here, cluster there. Okay, now, because of the short incubation period and the basically short life cycle that they go through, in a single growing season, you can have anywhere to 3 to 5 different generations of pickle worms going on at one time. So now that we know about the life cycle of the pickle worm, let's get into the damage that is caused by these guys. Okay, now the damage that they cause is relatively easy to identify. Okay, remember I said when they're in the larva stage, they are just eating the mess out of your fruits, the blossoms, the vines going to the fruit to interrupt the sugar flow to the fruit. I mean, these guys are chowing down. It's like a fat boy at a free buffet. That's how much they're eating. They're just going to town. Now, they'll have little holes all over your fruit, all over the blossoms, all over the vine that's going to the fruit. Excuse me. And you'll be able to see these holes. It's not like they're going to be itty bitty. No, these are going to be some big honking holes. And here's the thing. Be careful when you're picking up your fruit, okay? Because when you're eating that much, it's going in one end. Guess what it's doing? Coming right out the other one. Their digestive system is acting very fast. So each hole around the hole has, how do you say it? Pickle worm poop. Or like the scientist people like to call it, frass. Frass. It's pickle worm poop. Okay, and that's all around the holes. And that's how you're going to be able to know that you got pickle worms. Okay? There's going to be holes basically everywhere. So now that we know what to look for, how do we manage these guys? How do we get them? How do we get rid of them? Or how do we limit the amount of damage that they can do? Alright, so we learned how to identify the pickle worm. We've learned their life cycle. And we've learned about the damage that they do. Okay? And all of that's interesting and all of that is good. But here comes the depressing part. When it comes to managing them, our hands are kind of tied. Now, they do have natural predators, some birds, bats, the parasitic wasp. He helps out a little bit. but not one of them has done a significant amount of damage to the pickleworm population that we can say beyond a shadow of a doubt. If you got pickleworms, then put up a bat box. If you've got pickleworms, put up a Carolina wren nest box. But if you do a combination of all of these things, it will help. Okay, but it's not going to be the end all be all. Here's the problem with these guys. Okay, there's not really much, minus using insecticides, that you can do to remedy this problem. They're not attracted. You can't use the light zap traps because they're not really attracted to that. They're not really attracted to any pheromone type traps. Some people have put like cheesecloth netting over their plants to prevent the adult moth from coming in and laying eggs, stuff like that. That's been somewhat effective. Of course, you can always go in there and hand remove, smash, kill, stuff like that. If you got a very large population of them, then sometimes you just got to go nuclear. I hate to say that because I'm the first person that will stand in the line holding a sign that says no more insecticides. But sometimes you have population booms, and that goes with every creature on the planet. I mean, we've suffered through it this year with raptors here on our homestead. We had a huge population boom of the red-tailed hawk and the falcons, to the point where these animals were dive bombing our chicken tractors and killing themselves and hurting themselves just to be able to eat some of the chickens, because there were so many of them, the food source became scarce. So if you have a population boom of the pickleworm, then I would say, set some pickles and gourds off to the side, let them be bait, and then spray the tar fire out of them. That's something that you can do to help lower your population. Of course, hand removal always works. And then put your bat houses and your bird houses up and be very vigilant of going out there doing your inspections if you're just 100% set on not using chemicals. You may have to sacrifice a plant or two to keep them located on that one plant instead of them bouncing and ruining your entire harvest. See, that's the problem with the pickleworm. Okay? There's really not any means to it, and we don't really, the really big problem is everything that we taught you today is just about everything everybody knows about them. There's not a whole lot of information out there about them. And so, as I said in some of my gardening live streams, as our information evolves in gardening and our education evolves in gardening, when we're learning about the pests, the animals, and stuff like that, things like this, you won't have to go as nuclear as much. One of the things that I think that would help you is if you were doing the back to Eden process and you had an extremely healthy plant. When they bit into it, if it's extremely healthy and good and watered and very hydrated, it could drown the worm as soon as he bites into it. That could be, a good thing, just having healthy plants. You may get it into your mind that, okay, I'm going to plant an extra 4 or 5 plants so that way we can sacrifice some to the cucumber worm, and we go out there and we do a smash and grab on the eggs and the worms and stuff like that to combat them. But other than that, I always encourage you guys to experiment. If we ever get them, you can bet your bottom dollar that Mama's going to be out there experimenting with her essential oils. And as soon as we figure something out that helps, you guys will be the first to know. But get out there in that garden, experiment. Continue to do companion gardening. Continue to do the companion gardening with the Back to Eden method. Continue to encourage beneficial insects and birds and bats to be around your garden, and you'll never have a population outburst in these type of insects where you would have to go nuclear. Well, that does it for this week's episode with predator control in the homestead. Stay tuned for next week's episode when we're going to be talking about slugs and snails. Thanks for coming by the Big Bear Homestead, and like always, have a nice day.